Hello and welcome into the Luke Winstel Show. I'm your host, Luke Winstel. Thank you all for tuning in. Today I've got a great show ahead. I talked with Jerel, former NFL player, played for 7 years with several different teams. Most notably was drafted by the Green Bay Packers in the second round in 2012. I was really happy to have him on. We talked about all different kinds of things, from college football to the NFL, to his journey to the NFL, the Alliance of American Football, the XFL, and everything in between. I really enjoyed the interview with Jerel. I think you will too. So we'll go ahead and get to it. Thank you all for tuning in to the Luke Winstel Show. Mr. Worthy, thank you for joining me today.
It is a pleasure to be on the show. I'm excited to make your acquaintance, man, and I'm excited to be here, man. So I appreciate you having me on.
My first question for you, what was your journey like to get to the NFL?
Man, like most journeys, filled with a lot of ups and downs, some adverse situations. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, went to Wayne High School. I had my share of adversities coming throughout high school. My senior year, dealt with a serious knee injury before committing to a school, and so it kind of made my recruiting a little up and down because there was a lot of schools that were interested, and then I had schools that felt the need to kind of back away, and so Coach D'Antonio took a chance on me, and the rest was kind of history from there. I went to Michigan State, had an opportunity to play early after recovering from my knee surgery, and I had an opportunity to play, and it was one of the greatest times of my life. Went second round to Green Bay. There was a lot of ups and downs because I had another knee injury, another torn ACL. My rookie year. So I've overcome a lot of adverse situations, but I've been very blessed to be able to play in the NFL for 7 years. I'm currently a free agent now, and excited about my next opportunity with football and anything that comes after.
When did you hit the level and that point where you thought that you could play in college and be a very high level player there?
Well, at first it was a little shaky. When you first get to college, there's a lot of guys that were on their way to the NFL. There's a lot of talent around you, a lot of star players coming from their respectable schools. And so there were some times where, obviously some doubt set in because, practices wasn't going according to plan. When you first get on campus, everybody has to learn the ropes. But I think after my first year there, I redshirted my first year because I had a torn ACL my senior year in high school. After I rehabbed from there, working with Coach Ken Manning and the coaching staff there, I gained a lot of confidence in my time sitting out. And so when I had the opportunity to come back and play, and I had the opportunity to start as a redshirt freshman, I was all for it. And so, once I kind of put that fear to the side, I was able to go play, and at the end of the year, I collected a freshman All-American honor.
On the field, what would you say is your biggest strength?
My explosiveness. I believe that I'm pretty fast at getting off the ball, being very disruptive in the backfield, and so it's led to a lot of successful plays. I've had my share of penalties here and there with when it comes to obviously trying to play as aggressive as possible, but no foul play penalties, more so kind of offsides a little bit, but here and there, man, I just have an opportunity to get after the passer and have an opportunity to make plays in the backfield. And so I just use my athleticism any chance that I get to my advantage.
Well, playing at Michigan State, what would you say was your favorite moment playing college football or being around the game of college football?
Man, we had a lot of exciting moments because there was a program that would only average around 5 to 6 wins a year, and we were a part of we had the opportunity to turn things around. And so I think my first Big Ten championship was definitely very exciting for us. We won it out at Penn State on the road with everything that we had against us. Being able to go out there and win our first championship was very exciting, as well as playing in the inaugural Big Ten championship game that next year when it was introduced, especially with everything that we had at stake. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to move on to the Rose Bowl in that, but that moment itself was very special for us. And beating Notre Dame, on that fake field goal, man, it was really a wild night and just a very exciting time, and it's just a historical moment for us. And so I had a few moments, man, where we had an opportunity to that I have an opportunity to celebrate. Also being undefeated against Michigan, I would say, is one of my greatest accomplishments.
Oh yeah, I heard before the 2011 season you got a new tattoo. What's the story behind that?
Well, it was kind of interesting. I just wanted to do something that represented my school, represented the way I felt about it, and so we kind of discussed some things with me and my teammates. Benny Fowler, he's one of my closest friends, and so we discussed some things, and we came up with a Spartan. And so once we kind of came up with the Spartan and the design that we wanted to do, then guys kind of started to critique it and add their 2 cents, and until we end up coming with a Spartan with the Michigan State S on the shield, stepping on the head of a Wolverine. And so it was very exciting, and it was funny because the tattoo artist that actually did the tattoo was located down in Ann Arbor, and so it just really was a very funny story behind that. So the guy was able to do a phenomenal tattoo, and I didn't expect for it to get as much as exposure as it did, but when we had media day, one reporter saw it, and then it kind of just blew up from there.
One thing I like to do, I'll look back on college rosters and look at teams, especially top-ranked teams like some of the ones you played on at Michigan State. And I look at one of the rosters you played alongside Le'Veon Bell. What was it like playing with him? Did you always know he would be a special player and one of the top running backs in the league?
Absolutely. Le'Veon came in at a young age, displaying his talents. He had an opportunity to play as a freshman, and so it was really cool to see him go out there and showcase his talents, man. I mean, he was 30 pounds bigger than what he is today, doing the same things that he's doing now in the NFL. And so, when you first start to see that on scout team, and given the defense that was pretty well known at the time, a tough time in practice, you obviously have a bright future ahead of you. And he was able to transfer his talents from practice to the field, and now look at him. He's one of the best running backs in the NFL, if not the best running back.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how hard was it practicing against Le'Veon Bell on a daily basis?
Oh, it was tough, but it's exciting because he's a person that accepts challenges daily, and he's going to talk mess. We're going to talk mess. I'm known for talking mess, and so it was very exciting to have that opportunity to compete against him on a daily basis. And he welcomed the challenge, competing against our defense. And, we weren't no slouches. We had a lot of guys that had opportunities to move on to the NFL and compete on Sundays. And so it was really cool to see his growth from that situation until now.
You said you like to talk a lot. Any fun trash talking stories that you could tell?
Oh, man. I mean, I've had opportunities to talk mess to a lot of different quarterbacks. I had opportunity during the Big Ten championship game. I was talking a lot of trash to Russell Wilson. He obviously was having a great game the first half, and the second half we came around and were shutting him down. And so I remember tackling him one time in the backfield before he was able to hand the ball off, and he just kind of smiled at me, man. It was just so funny. He was like, man, he just was, congratulating me on being extremely fast in the backfield. And so, we're just talking mess the entire game. And so, obviously that and talking trash to Michigan, just literally obliterating them for 4 years straight was very intense for us. And we just had a blast, owning that state for the time we did.
Right now in college football, the top 10 is really loaded this year. Strong teams from every conference. Who do you like? Do you have a team that you like in the top 10 that you could see winning the championship this year?
Well, I will hope Michigan State get their act together so we have an opportunity to grace the top 10 at this moment. But going off the current teams that are in the top 10, for me personally, I like Oklahoma. I just like what Jalen Hurts has been able to do out there with that squad, and I just like the way that he's been performing with those guys. And I think that he's transformed himself as a player, and he's back on the radar as one of the top quarterbacks coming out next year in the draft. And so it's very interesting to see how well he's improved his mechanics in order to get this the team in place to compete for a championship. But right now, I think the biggest question mark for me is Ohio State. They have us coming up this week. It would be very exciting to see Michigan State pull off this win. I just think that they've had opportunities to play good teams. They've played well. They put on a very good display last week against Nebraska. And I'm just excited to see what they can do, and I'm excited for the week for this game coming up. So Ohio State and Oklahoma will have to be my top teams right there.
I'm wondering, with the college football playoff in the 4-team format, do you like it as it is, or should it be expanded? What is your opinion there?
I would like for it to be expanded. I think that there should be a shakeup with the teams and how they meet. I always believe that, the 1-4 game is always kind of written for the most part. It's never really a team that's coming in there with the opportunity to advance. And so I think that having the change up and expansion would give a team that would essentially be the fourth team in a more equal opportunity to advance.
Well, one thing in college football that I've been hearing a lot of people have been talking about the SEC. I know you played in your career a lot of games against them. Are they the best conference in college football, or is there a dominant conference right now?
Well, I believe the SEC is the most dominant conference in college football. I believe that there's other conferences that are a very close second. It's just that the level of talent that they kind of recruit each year in and year out, the development of the quarterbacks that they have competing down there in that conference is always substantially higher than other conferences. I mean, you might have you never necessarily get a guy like Justin Fields throughout your entire conference. I mean, there's playmakers all over the board in SEC, and obviously the Big Ten we're known for having very very good interior defense and offensive linemen. There's some playmakers on the edge here and there as far as both teams, but to be spread around equally, how it is in that conference is the reason why those guys are number one.
One thing that's been going on a lot in college football now that we've been seeing with top players that are projected to be high draft picks, like you were when you played in college, we've seen some of those players now skipping bowl games or missing out on that last game of the year. Is that okay, or what are your thoughts?
Well, it all depends on the player and his situation. I think that, if you have a guy that's going to be, a guy that's going to be a top 5 pick, a guy that's going to be essentially a game changer for a franchise at the next level, they should have that opportunity to decide whether or not they want to compete in a bowl game or whether or not they want to rest and take the time to just train and compete for the next level. They're already knowing that they're going to that next level, and when coaches take new jobs and they move on to new schools, they have the opportunity of whether or not they want to finish out at the bowl game or whether have an existing coach take over and they already move on with their new school to start with their recruiting. And so when you have a player that's going to be of a day one talent, a day one opportunity in the NFL, they should have that opportunity to make a decision if they want to play in their bowl game or not.
Well, speaking of the next level, after you left Michigan State, you entered the NFL draft process. What was draft day like for you?
Man, it was kind of bittersweet because like the first round of the draft, I was expected to go number 28 to Green Bay Packers. I ended up going the next round to Green Bay in the second round, but that first round that day was actually my birthday, and so I was very excited about the potential of going first round on my birthday. Had the opportunity to have some people from our neighborhoods around, all my high school and Pee Wee coaches, everybody that's had a pretty much an impact on me up until this point was around and present, and so it was a little disappointing not to be called that day, but it was also exciting to be able to have everybody around to celebrate my birthday as well. And so that very next day, it was a little bit of a smaller get together, but to have your name called in itself was very exciting.
You say you were expecting Green Bay to get you at 28. What led you to think that they were going to pick you? Because I know they eventually did end up picking you in that second round.
Well, it was just everything that I was kind of hearing from my agent and what they were saying, and just having that opportunity to sit there and talk with them on a daily basis. Joel Siegel and Shafi Fields are really good agents, and so when they kind of give you their word on things, they kind of know where teams are looking.
What was the hardest part for you transitioning to the NFL?
At first, the speed of the game. The guys were pretty fast, and I think just the overall tempo was faster. You have grown men moving at the speed of light, and so I think at the end of the day, it was a transition. But after a couple weeks of practicing, the body adapts and you gain confidence to be able to compete. And so I think the toughest transition was that, and secondly was the expansion of the playbook, because the playbooks and the defensive philosophies in the NFL are a lot more exotic than in college, and so the play schemes are different, and the terminologies and checks are different, and so you have to be able to pick up on that stuff and change week to week.
Do you have a favorite play that you've made in your 7 years in the league?
Man, let's see. I think my favorite play would probably be my first sack. It was against Jay Cutler on Thursday Night Football. It was my second game of the year. It was prime time. I had the opportunity to talk to Michael Irvin after the game. Growing up, I was a very big Cowboys fan, and so having an opportunity to see one of my favorite players all time, because he was working with the NFL Network and doing shows at that time, was very exciting. And just getting my first sack in Lambeau Field under the lights, and having the tradition that they have and being a part of that organization, it was very exciting.
Who is the best player that you ever played in a game, whether it be high school, college, NFL? Who's that one player that stands out?
I would believe, I think at the time when Mark Ingram was on his way out, when we had to play Alabama in the Outback Bowl. It was or not the Outback Bowl. It was the Capital One Bowl. It was just a really tough experience for us, man. That team was loaded. I think overall that was probably the most talented team that I faced at the time, with Julio, Mark Ingram, Trent Richardson, Eddie Lacy being the third string running back, Mays on the outside as well. Their entire defense ended up going on to play in the NFL. And so I just believe that at that point in time, that was probably the most skillful team or situation that I had to compete against.
Now, on the flip side, who is your favorite player that you ever played alongside? Who's your favorite teammate?
Man, I have a few of them, man.
Okay.
So in Green Bay, Mike Neal, Clay Matthews, my entire defensive line out there was very fun to play with. So from Mike Daniels, B.J. Raji to Ryan Pickett and Johnny Jolly, those guys were extremely fun to hang with, compete with on a daily basis. They made the job fun and exciting. My defensive line in Buffalo was very exciting to play with. Kyle Williams and Jerry Hughes and Marcel Darius and those guys. And learning from Mario Williams before he moved on was very exciting. I think one of the most eye-opening things was my rookie year, stepping into the huddle and on Thursday Night Football against the Chicago Bears, and looking around and seeing the cast of characters that I had with me, being B.J. Raji, Clay Matthews, A.J. Hawk is from my neck of the woods, and so he's technically a legend, and from where I'm from, and so being in the same huddle with him and Charles Woodson and those guys, it was very eye-opening to realize that I had accomplished something pretty great.
You said your defensive line in Green Bay was really fun to play with. What did they do that made it so fun for you and so enjoyable? What was that like?
Oh, man, well, in Green Bay, you don't have a choice but to hang with each other. So, it's not a lot of nightlife or anything like that. So it's kind of like a band of brothers, and you have opportunities to, spend time with each other's families. There's barbecues. There's, we'll play cards a lot. It was spades on a daily basis. And so having those opportunities to grow up on there, and on game day, it just was so funny, man, cracking jokes in between plays. We a certain bond and continuity between each other that was just fun to play with. So and obviously Aaron Rodgers is putting up points, so you have an opportunity to rush the passer a lot and just make some plays.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned that you came out there on Thursday Night Football against the Chicago Bears. One thing I've heard some players complain about is they are not fans of Thursday Night Football. They don't like the quick turnaround. What do you think about Thursday Night Football? What's your opinion? Should it even exist overall?
I like Thursday Night Football games, but I don't necessarily like the preparation for them because you're short-winded coming off a Sunday, and you don't necessarily have the opportunity to recover substantially like you do going from a Sunday to a Sunday. And so it becomes extremely difficult to go out there and compete at a high level off that short type of rest. And so with that being said, I like the Thursday night games because obviously you get a 3-day weekend, but to prepare for that game is extremely hard because you're less likely to have the information that you need in order to be successful for the game ahead.
Yeah, and with Thursday Night Football, do you think there could be something negotiated where you maybe have the bye week and then you play Thursday Night Football after that?
I think so. I think that they should have an opportunity to gain back the balance of recovery like they do with a Sunday to Sunday. And so any way that there's an opportunity to give players the chance to recover either before or after that, it would be phenomenal.
I wanted to ask your opinion on a new rule with the NFL allowing pass interference to be reviewed as a defensive player. What do you think about that?
I don't necessarily like it. I think in the case of the Super Bowl, not the Super Bowl, but the NFC Championship last year with Nikhil Roby and his hit on the outside, I believe that necessarily is a reason for having an opportunity to challenge. But being a defensive player, most defensive backs get the call called on them. In most situations, it's given to the offensive player or given in favor of the offensive player. So technically, I don't necessarily think that the challenge is acceptable. I just think that the way that we compete, it's just always it just creates another way to slow the game down, just giving more reason for more controversy. And so I believe that last year, if they would have just threw the flag, then all of this kind of wouldn't exist at this present time. But because the inability for the guy last year to throw the flag on a obviously egregious play, then now we're sitting here, wondering if replay is the right thing to do, or challenging is the right thing to do.
And I'm looking and thinking about the impact that one play had. You look in the Alliance of American Football, a league that you played in, they had a sky judge referee to try to overturn any egregious refereeing errors. And then you have in the NFL making this new rule. That play really had a big impact on the game.
Absolutely, it did. But at that present time, the referee, with the protocols in which they have to go through, all of those referees should have been on the same page with throwing a flag, where there was a clearly an offensive, call to be made. And so, at that present time, I think it was just the inability of that set referee that has put this in motion. But I think that you have to challenge the protocols and the way that the referees handle things, and to be more stricter on them to get the plays right, as more so like, creating more opportunities to throw challenge flags and plays in that situation. And so I just think that if the person would have just threw the flag, then it would be a lot different. I don't necessarily think that we should continue to add more and more rules for the play for the NFL. I mean, we've already gotten to the point now where it's essentially two-hand touch as opposed to actual tackle football, and so I just think that it's moving in a direction that it's not necessarily going to be good for a sponsor. I mean, for the viewers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, with to follow up on what you just mentioned there. You grew up playing football without a lot of these player protection rules, and now they're being put in, especially defensively. I know as a defensive lineman, it's hard to hit a quarterback legally, it seems like nowadays. I mean, how have you seen the game evolve through that? We've even seen a lot more penalties this year called than even last year.
I think it's very tough, man. I mean, you have a 300 to, most guys are between 250 and 350 pounds, rushing at a standardized target. Because most quarterbacks aren't mobile in the league. You're starting to see a difference in, how the quarterback is transitioning from college to the pro game, and they're starting to become more mobile. But majority of the NFL quarterbacks, the guys that we've known for the past decade, aren't as mobile as some of the fresh bodies that are coming in. And so you have to find ways to protect them, and I understand that. But when you're rushing a guy and you're trying to run through a guy that's 300 to 350 pounds, and you finally find the slight bit of clearance, and you're hauling tail, like, you don't have an opportunity to necessarily not fall on him, or if you're pass rushing or running a pass rush game and in your pocket, like, if you have an opportunity, the more sacks or the more half sacks that you get, those add up to more money in your pocket. So a lot of guys are pass rushing for their livelihoods. It's not necessarily having the opportunity just to hit the quarterback. These guys are rushing for potential new deals. And just like, wide receivers and running backs try to run over guys for touchdowns because they know that's incentive for them to make more money. It's the same thing when it's their defensive lineman pass rushing at the quarterback. And so I think that, with that being said, it's very tough to have these rules where you have to tackle a guy and you have to let go before you hit the ground. Like, if I'm coming in at 100 miles an hour, man, I mean, it's essentially very tough for me to hit a guy and to think in that split second, let him go and roll over or hit him and not, I understand not trying to hit a guy in the helmet. I understand not hitting a guy in the face mask. We can train to be able to have those things, but to train to not fall on a guy when you're essentially going 100 miles an hour, I think that's just really outrageous.
I was going to say, how do you adapt as a defensive lineman when these rules are being passed? I understand it. The quarterbacks are getting paid in the $100 million range. You want to protect your investment, I'm assuming, is what's behind it. But for you all on the defensive line, how do you train or how do you watch film and make the adjustments there?
Well, the NFL tries to send out, training videos and essentially trying to show the plays that are acceptable onto the league. And so they try to give you visions of how they want you to essentially get the job done. And so as a defensive player, you try to adapt and try to, put yourself in those situations. You're trying to train yourself through those situations. And so as a coach, you try to come out and have different ways of what you want to tackle. And you might adjust the techniques and to where, you have a defensive player thinking differently. But in the heat of the moment, man, when you have a grown man going up against a grown man, and each of you guys are really trying to compete in order to not be the guy that makes a mistake for your team, it's very tough as a defensive lineman when you have even a slightest chance at the quarterback, because they don't come often. And when you have a slight chance at getting your hands on the quarterback, it's very tough for you not to fall on him when you essentially have everybody flying around at that moment.
Well, to move on to my next topic, the NFL has several really good teams right now. The Patriots obviously are up there as always. The Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Saints, several others. Who is your pick right now? If you had to pick, who do you like in the NFC? Who do you like in the AFC? Who do you like overall for the Super Bowl?
Well, if I have to give a team right now, technically, if it was me, I like the Kansas City Chiefs, and as well as I like the New Orleans Saints. I understand that they don't have Drew Brees, but the talent that they're playing with on defense and the amount, the ability that they have to create turnovers and stop the run, they essentially faced the number one offensive line last week and the Dallas Cowboys, and they completely demolished them and shut them down. And so I think the way that this team has the way to rally around each other and the continuity that they play with, I really enjoy the way that the brand of football that they play. And so I think that offensively they're going to get better. I think that Teddy Bridgewater is going to find a way to limit mistakes. He's going to find out he's going to have an opportunity to expose defenses, and they're going to find ways to get Michael Thomas going. So that would be my pick out of the NFC. My AFC pick has been the Kansas City Chiefs. Offensively, they're a juggernaut. They don't even have Tyreek Hill yet. Shady McCoy's been up and down. He hasn't found his groove yet, which I know that from playing with them and having been a teammate of his for the past few years, I know that he's going to eventually get some things going and have some phenomenal games up under Andy Reid. And I'm just excited about their defense. They have playmakers all over the board that are essentially trying to find their way and mold together. And so I think that when you start to see this team week 6, 7, 8, 9, I think that they're going to have great opportunities to make some strides. And so I like them coming out of the AFC.
One league that you played in, the Alliance of American Football, I referred to it earlier. It's really intriguing to me just to kind of look back on the league. And I'm wondering, how did that journey start for you to get into the AAF? Because now we're seeing the XFL pop up again, and this concept of spring football is getting to be a big storyline and very intriguing right now.
Yeah, I think, my agent thought that it would be a good opportunity to just gain some film for the upcoming season, an opportunity to stay in shape for the months of not having being signed to an NFL team. And so it was set up for me to go out there and to compete for the months of January through April, and then having an opportunity to sign back with a team in April. And so, with that being said, man, it was an eye-opening situation to understand, how blessed it is to be in the NFL, and because of the structure and the way that things were kind of ran, and essentially. It was a little second tier to the NFL, the way that things were ran, and so you find a great appreciation for the opportunity to be able to be out there to display your skills and to have an opportunity to compete in the game that you love. But having things ran as professional as the NFL, week to week, knowing that you're going to have treatment, you're going to have payment, you're going to have an opportunity to find housing and support your family. I think that it's better. It was a better opportunity to be in the NFL than the AFL, but I'm definitely thankful for the chance that I got.
I'm wondering, I've heard a lot of different stories about the Alliance of American Football and players finding out how it dissolved or how it ended. How did you find out the league was folding before the first season even was through?
Well, we had just moved back to Orlando because our team had to essentially be stationed in 2 different places. We ended up spending 1 month in Orlando and the second month in Jacksonville. And so it was a transition, having to live in a hotel for a few months and essentially being away from your family for that time period. And so it was an adjustment for us. But when we first found out about the AFL folding, we were heading out to practice. We had our walkthroughs, and we had the opportunity to come back and talk with the team. And so once we got back in, our coach told us that the AAF was essentially going into a time where they were going to be shutting down the league for this week, and they necessarily didn't know how things were going to shake up, and that they told us to just basically hang out. We were going to have a meeting back at the hotel. We were going to talk about it and see how things were going to unfold. But once that news broke, and everybody kind of went back to the locker room, I came back out in the hallway and to essentially talk to someone, and then that's when I started to see all of our coaches clearing out all of their lockers and taking all of their things out. So that's when, in fact, I passed along the message to the rest of the team, like, hey, I think this thing is really shutting down. Everybody that's been in charge are clearing out their lockers, so I think we should do the same.
Well, it had to be an interesting experience for you playing with the old ball coach, Steve Spurrier. What was that like, having him as your head coach and his return to football?
Man, it was pretty cool because he's an exciting coach. He's very different in how he goes about things. He doesn't necessarily have a playbook, but he's a mastermind offensively. And the things that he was able to come up with week in and week out, being a defensive player and seeing the stuff that we would have to practice against, that they were preparing for the other team, it was pretty cool to see that he hasn't lost a beat when it comes to the way that he thinks offensively. And he just always had a bunch of cool sayings, and he was very positive, and he was just a guy that you always wanted to be around. He believed in team. He believed in selfless football, and so at the end of the day, it was very good, man, because I learned how to be more accountable under his tenure, and so it was very fun to play with.
Okay, you said he didn't really have a playbook. Could you explain that? What do you mean there?
Man, he would draw these plays up on like napkins, like dinner napkins at the table, and you would talk to the offensive players, and I'm like, "Where's your guys' playbook? We don't have one." And I'm like, "Well, what are you doing?" And he's just like, "Well, he draws these plays up that he thinks about every day, and we got to write them down." And so, he literally, he was a mastermind like that. He would just come up and draw things up on the board, and guys will have to write it down. And so he didn't necessarily give you an opportunity to have a playbook. And it was just cool to see, man, because I would sit there and be like, man, this stuff's not going to work, and it would really go out there and work and be great for his team. And so it was really cool to see.
Well, your team was named I put this in air quotes, the champion of the league, finished with the best record, 7-1. I heard Coach Spurrier got a ring. Did you get one, or what happened there?
Man, absolutely not. But it would have been great to get a ring, man, to just, have something to say that you earned for all the hard work that we put in, man. It was some difficult times, man, practicing on turf for essentially 2 to 3 months straight. You were out there, and obviously everybody knows that being on turf fields and having those types of conditions aren't always the best for the players and, their knees and ankles and all that type of stuff. So guys were kind of battling, man, going through those ups and downs with the league. And then, obviously we had that thing with the league might be going bankrupt and, having to fight for our checks. And so, obviously it was a difficult time on the business side of football. But, going to work every day with those guys were pretty cool. There was a lot of different characters, and I had a few old teammates like Ryan Davis, who played with me in Buffalo, was out there with me, and so it was pretty cool to have a couple guys that you knew and were pretty cool with to go to work with.
Having to fight for your checks, did you end up getting the payment that you were promised?
Not in full. I definitely can. I can attest to that, man. I believe that we had at least 3 more checks that we were supposed to be getting over that time period, and so everybody was not didn't have the opportunity to gain to get the amount of money that they were promised, and so that's a learning situation for us, man. And so obviously there's a battle right now going on where guys are trying to collect funds from the AAF, but the AAF filed for bankruptcy, and so having that being said, it's going to be kind of tough for guys to be able to collect the money that they feel that they were owed.
Well, one league that's launching here in 2020, the XFL. Are you planning to play in that league, or are there opportunities coming for you? I've heard there's a draft that will be coming in October. What's going on there?
There is an opportunity for me to compete in that league. Anytime you have an opportunity to compete in football, I think that there's it's a great deal of gratitude that goes along with it. The XFL has been around before, and it's making its return. I think that it's going to be structured a lot better than it was in previous times. And I'm excited to see where things kind of lead. Right now I'm still preparing for the NFL for when they call. That would be a great opportunity to go back out there and compete with a lot of the brothers that I know. But if the XFL, wants my services and there's an opportunity to compete and continue to extend my career, then I'm all for it. And so, I just enjoy football. I enjoy the camaraderie. I enjoy competing on a daily basis and being around those type of guys. And so, it's what I've known for since I was 7 years old. And so I'm just excited at any chance that I get to compete.
Do you think the XFL could be successful? I mean, you've been through one iteration of spring football where it didn't work out. Do you think they could be successful for a full year or long term?
I believe the XFL can be. I think that Vince McMahon is a guy that's been proven that he can run a successful business and brand. I also believe that there's chances for them to learn from the mistakes of the AAF. And so, I think that Vince McMahon is going to have opportunity to build this thing and Just like tournaments like the TBT tournament, which you see in basketball. You have the G League, and you have younger guys have an opportunity to compete in different leagues and ultimately end up in the NFL. I believe that giving players more platforms to showcase their skills is the best thing for the league.
Well, to finish off the show, how can fans follow you? How can they connect with you? What are your social media handles?
Man, so you guys can follow me on Instagram. I am worthy _99. You can follow my Twitter handle at I am _worthy99. You also can connect with me via Venmo at I am worthy99. Not Venmo, but Cameo. I apologize for that. Cameo. But if you guys want to connect with me via Venmo, look, I'll take a couple dollars too. But look, well, Cameo. If you guys want to connect with me via Cameo, I love connecting with my fans. I love having opportunities to discuss things and reach out to people. And so, any chance you guys get to connect with me, I'm all for. So I'm just excited again to be on the show.
Awesome. Jerel, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck to you in the future.
Thank you, Luke, man, and I appreciate the chance to being on this show, man. Thank you.
Thank you again to Jerel for joining me on the Luke Winstel Show. Please be sure to follow the podcast on social media at Luke Winstel Show. Winstel spelled Winstel. Thank you again for your support of the podcast, and I'll see you back soon with another one.